Welcome to Rules of the Game podcast. We're here at George C. Marshall's home in beautiful downtown Leesburg, Virginia. Dodona Manor. We're in the library this week, which is exciting. And with me is the one and only Drew Clyde, who's a pastor of Headway Church here in Leesburg. You run the Junction, right?
Leesburg Junction. Junction for short.
Leesburg Junction, that's right. So actually it was kind of my office for about a year, roughly.
Loved having you.
So welcome, man. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. No, it's great to be here. Thanks for asking me.
So we're not sure what we're going to talk about, but we're going to talk about a variety of things. So what's it like? Let's just start with what's it like running a church during COVID?
Oh, wow. I feel like every week we go, what are we going to do next week? No, it's actually been great. We've started meeting back in person about a month and a half ago. We have online, we call it a meetup at our church instead of a service, and you can engage with meetup online YouTube. We have outdoor seating.
Okay.
And then we have indoor seating with masks, and we're actually phasing into kind of the restaurant style this Sunday.
Okay.
Actually next Sunday, where when you're
tables.
sitting, every table per family, and when you sit down, you can take your mask off.
That's cool. That's good stuff, man. So what is that? Has it changed what you talk about at all?
Wow. Yeah. Well, I don't know if that's why it's changed, but we've had lots of hard conversations. I think whether it's the racial unrest, whether it's COVID, whether it's election, it's brought up areas that people disagree about that we didn't have to talk about before.
Okay.
Which I don't necessarily think is a good thing. I see this as actually good, where we are going to have to learn how to be a part of the same church family and on mission together, and
with people you disagree with.
So how do you talk about things you disagree with in a respectful, loving way?
God, I wish I had any experience of that at all. Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. It's why I spend so much time doing this.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know how. I've said for years that, articles have been written about the reason we get some of the people we get running for higher office, and we don't name names on these discussions because it's not relevant. But the reason we get what we get is because we stopped talking about these things because we decided it was impolite to talk about religion, politics, and philosophy.
Okay.
Or impolite to talk about religion and politics, but nobody wants to talk about philosophy because most people don't understand it or want to. Right?
I love talking about philosophy.
Do you really? Well, that's good.
I think so.
That's good. So, free will or determinism? I'm just kidding. But the challenge to me, it would seem to me that running a church and having to have those discussions within a church, that you would have one sort of point of view. Would you have one point of view that kind of dominates, or is it kind of half and half? Or
okay, so that's good. I think
it doesn't matter which one.
I think. Well, I think we are a Bible-believing, teaching church, but as you know, lots of godly people interpret Scripture differently.
No, I thought there was only one way.
I thought
that God came down every Sunday and said, "Look, this is what I meant in Matthew 24 or whatever." No, He doesn't do that.
No, and I think what I believe is that our job is to do our best to, with our responsibility in studying as well as trusting God, to empower us to do our best on this journey of better understanding what He said and why. And so I do believe there's truth there, and even absolute truth there. Do I know it all? Do I know what that absolute truth is all the time? No. So,
but it's there.
But I think it's there.
That's the difference, right? I think
I can say what I think it is and why.
Right.
But I've learned enough not to say I've got it all figured out. I'm 100% certain, because I know that I've changed from 5 years ago to today. So I'll probably...
Really? You're not exactly the same
I
as you
will
were
probably believe a few things differently 5 years from now as well. So
I can certainly relate to that.
So just to answer your question, I think I share what I believe Scripture's saying, and it's again, I think we can learn a lot from a lot of other things. I don't think being in conflict with Scripture is a problem, but there's a lot that we know is true outside of Scripture. God speaks in many ways, but
Sure.
I think we've always said, so our church is one where we say, no, this is a beautiful thing that we don't all agree.
Sure.
And how else are we going to grow and learn and change if we don't disagree and challenge and sharpen one another? The problem in churches is when people go, hey, if you believe this, then you're welcome. Bad things happen usually then when you start where you can't ask questions and you
In
can't
other words,
disagree.
if you don't believe this, you're not welcome. Right?
Yes,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
even just you get the feeling like I can't ask questions, or I can't disagree. So we say like, no, there's obviously for us it's Jesus is Lord is kind of like the banner.
Right.
And we can disagree. You may even disagree about what that means, but
Sure.
we can disagree and let's talk about it. That's a good thing in love and respectfully, and we'll all be better for it. So I think people in our church especially are kind of like, okay, they know they're going to not always hear something they agree with.
Well, sure. What's your background like denomination-wise? Though, did you grow up in a non-denominational, church, or were you?
Yeah. I grew up kind of on the more charismatic side of
Okay,
things, non-denominational.
Oh, that kind of non-denominational.
Yeah, probably a little more actually Pentecostal roots.
Right. Pentecostal.
And then went to college and realized that other people from other denominations love Jesus too.
No, only the people just like you love Jesus, right? That's the way that works.
But no, it was awesome. I went to James Madison University, not a Bible college or Christian university,
Sure.
but was involved in a group that was a Christian group, and realized, and actually went to a Presbyterian church in college, which is very different from non-denominational, definitely Pentecostal in a lot of their theology.
Presbyterian, yeah, it's very different.
And then was at a Baptist church for a year, worked at Prison Fellowship, which, the beautiful diversity and unity within the Christian faith in that organization.
Sure.
Worked at a more non-denominational church, and then our church that we planted 7 years ago is, and I don't even like to use non-denominational because we're not against denominations. We're fine with denominations.
Sure.
Sometimes people can be like, oh, we don't like denominations. No. It's more just we just aren't a part of one, really. So.
Well, I've heard that described as interdenominational.
Interdenominational, yes.
Right. I mean, I remember at college we had an interdenominational group or whatever.
It feels a little more just welcoming, and we're not against.
Sure. Do you have any Catholics, like that recovering Catholics?
We, honestly, you get to know people and know a little bit of their background. I wouldn't be surprised if we have people that either, a Catholic background or maybe even consider them. Can you be Catholic and not go to Catholic church? I don't know.
Butch, that's not how this works. Yeah, no, I was born, I was christened Catholic. I married, I ended up being raised Southern Baptist through a series of circumstances. And I married a Catholic girl. I'm raising 2 Catholic kids.
Yeah.
I'm actually technically Orthodox. That's a whole different conversation
so
for another day.
You have an interdenominational family.
I am. I'm an interdenominational person. Like right here, I'm interdenominational.
Yeah.
I think what Orthodox has in common with interdenominationalist is the way I've heard it put is that we're very confident about where the church is. Mm-hmm. We're not going to assert exactly where the church isn't.
Okay.
Right. So if someone says that they believe all the things that I believe, I'm going to take their word for it unless somehow they prove me otherwise. Not to say that there aren't cults and there aren't heretical beliefs, but for the most part, there's some things in common. I remember I went to a church when I was in college called the Church in Baton Rouge in Louisiana.
Right.
And it was part of Watchman Nee, Witness Lee.
Okay.
It was a Chinese missionary. Mm-hmm. They were put in a list of cults for like 20 years. And the result was people in China being put in prison and because they had an excuse right. And
Right.
so and there's this organization called, it was a radio show, or probably a podcast now, called The Bible Answer Man, and he had a
Yes.
publication.
I remember.
You remember the Bible Answer Man? Right. The Bible Answer Man had, and that organization, I can't remember what it's called, had put Watchman Nee's church on that list
There
of
was
cults.
the cult list.
The
that
cult
they put
list,
out.
right?
Right.
And so, but I don't think at the time they really realized what the implications were.
Right.
And so, like 20 years later, they wrote one of their. This was in 2014 or somewhere. It was fairly recently, within the last 10 years. One of their issues came out, and the whole magazine was an apology.
Right.
It basically was, we were wrong, and it just laid out exactly why they were wrong about putting them on that list, and the consequences of it were huge. But most of it was the fact that it was a Christian sect or denomination that originated in China.
Yeah.
And the way that the Chinese look at spirituality is different than we do, just culturally and historically. And so some of it was misinterpreted. Some of it was the church was making the assertion. It sounded like it was making the assertion that this is the church.
Yes.
But what they're actually saying is this is the church and the people are the church. And it was kind of a semantics thing. But you know what they did? It's weird. Okay, after 20 years, they decided to actually go and talk to
somebody.
and like have a conversation about what they meant by X, Y, and Z. And the result of that conversation was not what they expected. And that's, so I think talking is like a huge. So you're doing, on that note, you're doing these meetings. How often do they happen? They're called the One Gathering.
So
it's an inter-church thing.
Yeah, it's all about just the church. We are called to be one, which means diverse yet unified. So unity with diversity. And it's kind of saying, let's stop focusing on, first of all, our differences and prejudging those differences, kind of like you said, which is like, oh, I heard that, so then I'm going to believe, fill in the gap with all this negative,
That's
scary stuff.
Exactly right. Filling in the gap. Like whatever I don't know, I'm just going to fill it in with what I think
I mean, it's
know.
It's what we say, our problem in our country, but it's also in the church, is we take a little bit of information, we are too lazy to actually talk about it.
That's 21st century politics right there.
It's easy, yes, and it's easier just to label and assume and judge on what I don't know, rather than actually get to know, and then I can judge what I know.
But then, Drew, you'd have to assume that the other person is a human being with like thoughts and feelings.
Exactly.
And stuff.
So
there's a risk
if you demonize, if you think they're a demon.
Yeah, see, that's the part I never have.
Why you don't want to talk to demons? So if it's a demon, then you wouldn't talk to them. But
so Headway Church doesn't do a lot of shunning. That's not their.
No,
that's
I think
their modus operandi.
If
you leave the church, then all of your family is forfeit.
I believe passionately, and I will say, I have. First of all, I can say what I believe passionately and why, and you can say differently, and then we can be friends and get back together next week and keep talking about it.
Yeah, I think that's the way it's supposed to work.
Right. So the One Gathering, get back to, is we've done 2, and we're having our 3rd on October 18th. We wanted it is just has a very simple purpose.
It's a prayer.
Very simple gathering.
It's
a prayer gathering.
Right.
And it's to unity as far as, definitely ethnically, racially, but more than that, denominationally, generationally, just realizing that we all have different experiences, different styles, different cultures, and it's a beautiful thing. So we're getting more churches involved.
How many churches do you have now?
I mean, we had like 20 different churches in Loudoun represented, and we had about 250 people.
That's great.
And it's just spreading. We didn't want to, basically people come and see what it is. They then decide if they want to tell their pastor or their church or their friend, so that the next time. So all we do is we sang a few songs, and we just pray for what we believe God to do, what only He can do, which is actually true change of heart, true unity, where all this junk gets in the way, like we're saying, hey, can you do what we don't seem to be able to do? And so it's
Because we
it's
can't,
great.
right?
Because we
We're
can't.
not-
I don't
we're
know
not
that
capable of it.
we don't have the power to do it. So
Apparently not. It's become fairly evident that we're not really good at it, at least not at the moment.
we haven't figured it out to this
No.
point. Yet.
Well, it is a spiritual thing. We've had great awakenings in the United States before, and I think we're due for one of those. Is that one possibility of how we get out of this mess? Is a real resurgence of? I mean, what's happened in the U.S. now is that the number of people who are going to church is going down.
Right.
The number of people who profess to be Christians or religious people in general are going down.
Yes.
And big mega churches are growing, right? So you had these big, and nothing against these mega churches.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of good people go to them, obviously.
Yeah.
But it is different. Like when I was a kid, there were mid-sized churches, and now there seem to be a lot of little churches and then these big monster churches. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot.
How much time do you have?
No,
Butch?
I think so. A great awakening or revival, I mean, again, some people.
I hesitate to use the
I
R
know.
word.
So
that has
if-
Great Awakening is something that's
Yes.
that's worldwide. That's
like
or
anything,
at least
yes,
culture-wide.
like anything, you have a word and it makes people think about different things. So
I'll think of a tent.
that's
right?
right, exactly, and so I don't think that is the
You don't think that's the solution? Okay.
My point is, I do believe there's an awakening, but it's a lot of times we think if there's a great awakening, it's going to look like it did the last time. Or at least that's our only concept.
That's kind of what we have in our head of what that means.
Yes, and
so
I don't think it's going to happen in that way. I think it's more of, I do think, yes, there's mega churches growing. I do think in many large churches, even pastors and leaders of those, many of them would admit that that's got a lifespan. In other words, that's coming closer to the end of that model.
Well, it's an emotional thing, and it's sort of short term. It's a surge.
Yeah,
and I guess your
there's
concern is that it's not lasting.
Well,
it's
it's going to not. Studies have been done where 65% of people are never walking through the doors of a church.
Really, 65% have said they're never. It's
Yes.
not. They've
So
closed that.
if there's going to
door.
be a great awakening, it's not going to be because a bunch of people are showing up to a tent or a church building.
Right. It'll be something else.
So it would need to be, which if you go back to
It'll be on a Zoom
the
call.
scripture, well, some would believe that. I don't believe. There's only so much awakening that can happen over Zoom, but I
Really? You
think
think there's,
I believe we have to go back to again, not the original model, but the original principles that Jesus lived and spoke about, which was how do I, if I I'm a believer, and I have the church was just people in relationship with one another that shared a cause that they believed was worth living for and even dying for, right?
Sure.
So they said, I'm going to bring this message into my everyday life, whether that's my work, my team, my class, my whatever, my neighborhood. And if it really matters, and this is something that a message that someone needs to hear about, or a relationship that someone needs to have, that I'm not going to invite them to a church that we created.
Right.
Church actually was originally just a result of a cause that they were on. So the church was just a natural outgrowth of
It's a place where you get
sharing
communion every
Jesus,
Sunday. That's
right?
That's what it was. Yeah.
But we kind of and I get it. I planted a church, right?
Sure.
But I think we take kind of the lazy way where we go, let's start this thing, let's plant it in the community and invite people to join it.
Right.
And then you can hear about Jesus, rather than going, no, let's tell people about Jesus, and then the church
Doesn't
will form.
that put way too much pressure on individual human beings actually communicating with other
Right.
individual human beings
Well,
about their faith?
We've done
Wait a minute, is that in the Bible?
We've
Like,
done
we're supposed to
Christians a
all do that?
disservice, because what we did
Right.
is we said, you don't have that job anymore. This
That's
thing that we created does,
I
and it
wish
has
I
a
could
marketing
think-
budget.
Now, Drew, I wish I could think of this parallel where, maybe a large entity has has pushed into a market and shoved out private entities and kept them from actually doing their job, and instead taken on that job themselves. Oh yeah, the federal government for the last 100 years. So no, I actually had this conversation about churches this morning, about charitable, like the charitable side of being in a church, being involved in churches, which their responsibilities are less than they were because, and somebody was saying, well, they don't need to anymore because other people are doing it, whether it be governments or other big charities or whatever. And I'm like, that could be a bad thing, right? Because the people are less involved directly because they're not. So by the same token as what you're saying is from sharing a faith standpoint, it's the same thing. There's value to me in sharing my faith individually with another human, not just making sure it's done by somebody else.
Exactly, right. I mean, not only it's valuable to you, the mission is more effectively accomplished as well.
Sure.
And, you know, it's basically the church, and we've been talking about this on Sundays, like, has become like many other things. It's like a store.
There's certain services we assume from
in this country. We are told we're consumers. We act like consumers. So even with church, we go to get our spiritual goods and services from. And so then I'm not a contributor. Oh, dude, I'm totally hitting my microphone here.
That's all right. If you heard a loud boom,
sorry.
those listening.
I go and I see myself as a consumer rather than a contributor. The church is this thing that's here for me, but in reality, we are the church, and we're here for a lost and hurting world.
This is a much broader conversation, right? Because the truth is, this is true. You know, Yuval Levin wrote a book recently called Time to Build, and it's one I recommend to all of our listeners because it talks about not just in terms of the church, but it talks about our institutions. How our institutions have become sort of two things. They become places where we get something out of it, and also more performative than formative.
Yeah.
So in other words, if we go to a church, either we're just trying to we're checking a box, like, you know, I mean, if anybody's grown up with enough, you know, sort of Easter and Christmas Catholics, right? Then you know you have that sort of, you're checking boxes, but there's two parts. One is we're trying to get something out of it that's specific, or two, we use it as a platform to show how important we are.
Perform,
right? So
perform,
performative instead of formative.
Like that,
and so church is supposed to be formative. Like even until the day we die, the purpose of doing the church thing is to let it change us into better people and constantly improve ourselves. And I think you're right. I think part of the issue is that we're not treating it that way. We're treating it as a club with benefits. Right. And that's not a healthy way to treat church. And you think that's one of the reasons why it's changed so much.
Well, now
because people don't see the value in it anymore. Long term, you don't see the value.
I believe that we do everybody a disservice when we make church that, because they come and they go, well, this is no different than anything else in my life. I thought this was supposed to be life-changing. And they... but they
I'm
basically
sorry, that's
go,
not funny, but it's probably very
it is
true.
kind of funny, because they go, wait, I thought this was something that is worth living for, that there's fullness of life that comes out of this.
Who's responsible for this, though? Whose fault is it? Is it the churchgoer's fault, or is it your fault?
I'm just kidding.
Is it pastor's fault?
I do believe it is more leadership's fault.
Sure.
And there's a lot of, I could talk.
That's not
there's
always
so
true,
many things.
right?
No,
Sometimes
everybody's got
wrong.
to take responsibility. Yes, or but there hasn't been. You have to other options. To people start then finding ways. How can my faith not be consumeristic? How can I be a contributor? And many times they have to go outside of the institution, the church as they knew it, to live that out, which is sad.
Right.
But and so that's where I think that there's people are going, okay, church exists now. All these things that I thought had to be there for me to be a part of church or to have a relationship with God. No, to be a part of the church means I'm in relationship with other believers
Sure.
that want to be on mission with and for Christ. And so as long as I'm in relationship and I'm on mission in my everyday life, that's more church than being a part of this institution.
Sure.
So I think there's this awakening where people realize that, and many people are disillusioned with the church, but hopefully they're not giving up God with the church, and they're able to go, no. Now, I think a lot of people mistakenly too, they go, well, I just need God, just the vertical relationship. And they go, well, I don't need people. Like, I don't need church.
Yeah.
And that is incomplete too. It just doesn't have to be in the form. Like, I need you. I can't know God as well as I should and I want to without you.
Right.
And vice versa. He created it that way. So.
Well, I mean, education has similar,
Right.
all of our institutions are suffering from that.
Right.
There's this sort of, cheapening of it, right? We've decided that it's just another thing, right?
Well, it's the challenge right now with Zoom and COVID is, it's a lot easier. Relationships are hard, okay? So, so it's like, I'd love it if following Jesus was just me and him. And he, though, throughout Scripture is like more than ever goes, you show me that you love me by loving other people.
Sure.
And, you can't love me and hate your brother or even ignore your brother or, just be on Zoom with your brother. Like, you got to be... You got to be in relationship. You got to be connected, and that's my fear of this. Is people are going, "Wow, church is a lot easier when it's just online."
I just dial in. Yeah, it's all good.
And my fear is
change
that
my username to reconnecting, so with ... so that no one expects me to actually do anything.
And I get
Some
it.
kid did that the other day for his fourth grade class. It works really well.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I get it. I get it. Why it's easier, but we have to go. No, what's best.
Well, that's
is hard.
kind of a good sign, though, right? That it's bad. I mean, if it's easier, that's probably a fair to middling indication that it's not good. Right?
Well, so we said
things that are good are harder.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
No.
That's right.
Well, that's why I said the church has tried to do what we do for consumers. You're in control. This is convenient and comfortable.
Yeah, as
the American dream in a sense, right? Is that?
Exactly. But if you're Orthodox or even Catholic,
yeah.
Or any number of other faiths, then it's objectively not true that you can just dial up God and hey, we're a direct line. Right. I mean, there's the church is the body of Christ, and it by definition means more than one person. Yeah. Right? It can't be just you. And but I think there's some. Another good one is culture of narcissism. That's been around since the late 70s. It's actually was written kind of from the left, and now it's getting a resurgence on the right because narcissism is this obsession with self is probably, I would put that as a top 5 of one of our problems. Like, this authenticity and, identity and that whole thing does make it hard to convince somebody to walk through a church and say, this isn't actually about you. This is about something much, 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 much more important. Yes. Right?
As human beings, our flesh, whatever you want, we want to be in control. We want things to be convenient. We want to be comfortable. And if we can be a part of the church, and the church is actually, it seems like offering those things, like you can follow Jesus, and this is great, man. This is comfortable. This is convenient, and this is.
I keep coming back to like a George Carlin Jesus. He plays a priest. I can't remember what movie that was, or is Buddy Jesus? Right.
Well, no. It's kind of like have your cake and eat it too. It's like you can.
Well, the issue is, I think that the issue is that we want all the positive parts of Christianity, and we don't want any of the negatives.
And when
we don't want the cost. There's this. Try to talk to anyone who is not a devout Christian or a devout religious person about the nature of sin. Right? I mean, sin is one of those things. Like even if it doesn't hurt someone else, you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, it's hurting you.
And I think part of it is the modern just modernism since the 1600s
Yeah.
has been, or earlier, has been along this notion that, look, as long as we're not hurting anybody else, we can do what we want. That's not the way this works. It's really not.
Well, so that's why I say we've done a disservice, because when we allow that or let people think that, they're not experiencing the full life that we said there is in following Jesus.
Sure.
And so then they're disappointed. And they're going, well, wait a second, this isn't what I thought I signed up for this. And we're going, we're saying, no, actually, the full life comes from discomfort, through sacrificing, laying down your life for others, through even serving others, through even suffering potentially with and for others.
Absolutely.
And it's surrender. It's not being in control. It's allowing God to be in control. And it's actually you're inconvenienced in life.
At the very least,
Yes.
inconvenienced.
At the very least. But what I've learned and what I believe is, and this is where we have a hard time, we go, well, how can a full life come from that?
Right.
It's like it is the supernatural thing, that fullness of life actually comes through considering others above yourself.
You don't even have to be a Christian to believe this.
No,
the
yeah.
truth
No,
is,
totally.
we've known for
Yes.
2,500 years, so before Christ, we've known that happiness
Right.
can be best achieved by pursuing virtue.
Yes.
Right. The problem is that sometimes we don't know what virtue is. So
Right.
part of the purpose of this thing, even if you're looking at it from a secular standpoint, is to pursue virtue, which almost always is not convenient.
Yeah, no.
I mean, it can't always be convenient,
Yeah.
right? And so, I think the challenge is that we've made it just another club. We've made it just another way we identify. I'm a Christian. I'm a this. I'm a that. I'm a whatever. And so, if it's an identity thing and it's a club thing and it's not an actual spiritual sacrifice thing, and that doesn't mean your Opus Dei, flatulating yourself
not
or
at
whatever. For those
It's
who are
love.
listening, I've got an imaginary whip going to my back.
It's just love. Love requires.
Love
what
is
does love
pain and
require?
suffering,
It's
right?
sacrifice.
That's right.
Something valuable to me, I sacrifice for you. There's no love communicated if I'm not willing to sacrifice something valuable for you. That's love.
Okay, so one last thing before we wrap up. All of my guests have to come up with a rule. It is called Rules of the Game, so everyone gets to make one rule. So no pressure or anything. Obviously, you were warned ahead of time. You were told. So it can be about practicing your faith. It could be about the way you're involved in the community. It could be about conversations. It can be anything you think is like a rule that you feel like we should
live by.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's good. I think it's what I shared. Just let's.
Sure, it can be an executive summary. It's
Okay.
not a
Well,
problem.
I think it is love. What does love? I always ask the question: what does love require of me in this moment, in this relationship?
I like it. Always ask the question, what love requires of me in this moment.
Because
That's
even
good stuff.
when I think I know the right thing to do, or I feel justified in an action, and I ask myself that question, I'm like, I think the right thing to do and the loving thing to do would do this. I don't want to do that, but
Right.
that's what I should do.
That is a good rule. I like that. That's going in the books.
All right.
That's so I look forward to talking again, and until we see you again, those who are listening or watching, go have a great conversation, but play by the rules.